Goodbye Northern Ireland Protocol, hello Windsor Framework. The Prime Minister presents his new trade deal for Northern Ireland with the EU. Standing alongside the head of the EU Commission, Rishi Sunak hailed what he called a turning point and a decisive breakthrough.
Today's agreement delivers smooth-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom, protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland.
The new agreement would significantly reduce customs checks and still allow Northern Ireland a say in any new EU rules that affect it.
A day of careful choreography. It was all smiles and warmth between the two leaders, even a sense of relief. But now for Rishi Sunak, he has to sell his deal and persuade the sceptics.
So will the so-called Windsor Framework get the approval of unionists in Northern Ireland? And what will it mean for future relations with the EU? Also on the programme, why your energy bills are likely to go up from April, despite the amount companies can charge households going down.
I think it is time that members of this House grew up.
Tributes are paid to Betty Boothroyd, who's died. She broke 700 years of tradition to become the first female Speaker of the House of Commons. And what does this bout between two men more famous on social media than in the ring mean for the future of boxing?
On BBC London, after 7 years and £700 million, a revamped Bank station opens. But could it be the last major transport upgrade for some time?
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. Historic, a breakthrough, a landmark. The words of the Prime Minister and the head of the EU Commission to describe a new agreement for trade between Northern Ireland and the EU. What has been known as the Northern Ireland Protocol, bitterly contentious ever since it was introduced as part of Boris Johnson's oven-ready Brexit deal, would be no more. It would be replaced by the Windsor Framework, a new deal aiming to solve the current onerous trade barriers. Until today, under the Northern Ireland Protocol, certain goods have to be checked when they enter Northern Ireland from Great Britain to ensure they conform with EU rules. And goods can then travel freely onto the Republic, which is in the EU, without extra checks. But critics say these rules mean Northern Ireland is treated differently from the rest of the UK. So what would the new Windsor Framework mean? Well, goods from Great Britain that stay in Northern Ireland would pass through a green express lane with little or no additional checks. And goods from Great Britain going to the Republic of Ireland, that is, into the EU, will have to be checked. Northern Irish businesses would no longer be subject to EU rules on VAT, but would fall into line with the rest of the UK. The Northern Ireland Assembly would be able to block new EU rules from applying to their businesses under certain conditions. That's called a Stormont break. And crucial to the success of this deal will be the backing of Conservative MPs and the Democratic Unionist Party, who've yet to decide. Our political editor, Chris Mason, reports.
For months, negotiations have rumbled on in the undergrowth. Finally then, at a posh hotel near Windsor, just outside London, and a spot with a keen sense of its place in British history, the stage is set. Mind you, not before the President of the European Commission had posed for photos with some builders in London on her way here. And from the informal and spontaneous to the formal and very carefully choreographed, Ursula von der Leyen then arrived to meet Rishi Sunak at lunchtime. A few hours later at Windsor's Guildhall, the announcement.
I'm pleased to report that we have now made a decisive breakthrough. Together, we have changed the original protocol and are today announcing the new Windsor Framework. Today's agreement delivers smooth-flowing trade within the whole United Kingdom, protects Northern Ireland's place in our union, and safeguards sovereignty for the people of Northern Ireland.
The European Commission President was notably warm towards the Prime Minister, referring to him as Dear Rishi.
We knew we had to work hard with clear minds and determination, but we also both knew, dear Rishi, that we could do it because we were both genuinely committed to find a practical solution for people and for all communities in Northern Ireland.
In this deal, easing trade is central, as is ensuring products, whether seeds or medicines, that are available in Great Britain are also available in Northern Ireland, and that taxes and duties can be the same, and what the government calls the minimum level of EU laws needed in Northern Ireland to avoid a border with the Republic. It will, though, still mean a role for the European Court of Justice. So, will it be enough?
If the Democratic Unionist Party don't go back into government in Northern Ireland after all of this, does it ultimately amount to a failure?
Often we focus on the politics of situations, Westminster and all the rest of it, but this is about the people of Northern Ireland, about the communities, about the businesses there, and what's best for them.
Not exactly a direct answer. What will the Democratic Unionists do next?
Are you thinking this is going to be a good deal for Northern Ireland?
I haven't seen it yet, so once we've seen the legal text, we'll come to a view on that.
Do you feel positive?
Well, I'm neither positive nor negative.
Sinn Féin, the largest party in the Northern Ireland Assembly, have a clear view.
I welcome the fact that a deal has been done. We've always said that it was possible to have a deal. We've always said that with pragmatism, solutions could be found. So the fact that both sides have arrived at that point today, and this represents the end of the negotiation, I think is something that will be well received.
Tonight, the Prime Minister is heading back to Parliament to sell his deal to MPs. Labour are on board, but we await the verdict of Tory backbenchers. Among them, some familiar faces. As a former sceptic, now a minister, gives his endorsement.
This is a terrific achievement. I'm delighted. As late as yesterday, I still thought I might have to resign.
I think progress on the protocol is in the national interest, and I've made it clear that I'll put country first and party second, and therefore, yes, we do fully expect to back the deal.
For Ursula von der Leyen, tea at Windsor Castle with the King, a brew some feel uncomfortable about, bolted onto a very political visit. Most will forget that, though, if, and it remains an if, today's deal delivers everything she and the Prime Minister hope for. Chris Mason, BBC News, in Windsor.
Well, since Brexit, some businesses in Northern Ireland have been badly affected by the current trading arrangements. Others have welcomed them. So what changes would they like to see? Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy reports.
As political leaders chart a new course for trade between Britain and Northern Ireland, some business groups here have broadly welcomed the new deal, which they're hoping will end years of Brexit tensions.
I don't think any of that has been helpful. I think the political instability, the lack of understanding about where is all this taking us is not good for business.
For some businesses in Northern Ireland, the protocol has meant mountains of new red tape, but others have benefited from a dual market advantage.
The Northern Ireland protocols really allowed us to continue to operate as we were pre-Brexit, while the rest of the UK exited, and indeed Northern Ireland did. The protocol provided a mechanism that allowed us to continue to trade freely with the rest of the European Union and also with the UK, where many of our competitors who are based on the UK mainland don't have.
But one of the big problems negotiators have tried to solve are suppliers in Britain being put off from sending goods over the Irish Sea, as companies are hit by the extra time and costs involved to comply with the paperwork and checks. This haulage firm are one of many now waiting to see the detail in the new deal and how far it will go in reducing those barriers.
If there's enough friction removed by the new Green Lane, we should see some bounce back. If this removes enough friction, that trade will bounce back almost within days and weeks.
Will that be the real test?
That'll be the real test.
But there's cautiousness while businesses wait to see how cumbersome the requirements might be to send goods through the new streamlined Green Lane.
From the announcement, what we really need to see now is the detail around the deal. We need to understand how green the Green Lane actually is.
Do you think suppliers and GB will be reassured by this?
Remember, we will be asking GB traders to do things that they don't do for the rest of the UK. They don't have to be part of a trusted trader scheme for England, Scotland or Wales. So for a small amount of their market, we'll be asking them to join schemes, provide data, potentially be audited for what is a small part of their market.
So it's about how this works in practice?
We live this, we operate this every single day, right down to the last box. We need to know how it affects us, how it affects our customers.
If businesses back the New Deal, it will strengthen Rishi Sunak's hand in facing down any critics. In the long Brexit journey, today we've arrived at a new destination, but it may take time for the full picture to become clear. Well, what businesses make of this deal is really only one part of the equation here, because Northern Ireland has been without a government for a year, and the question is there enough in this deal to persuade the DUP to drop their opposition and go back into Stormont? Now, on the face of it, there were clearly parts of the announcement today designed to address the DUP's concerns, things like giving politicians here a say over which EU laws will apply to them. On the other hand, the continuing role of the European Court of Justice won't go down so well. But the DUP isn't making any quick decisions. They are going through the detail. They will have to weigh up whether their demands are met sufficiently to decide whether they can support this.
Emma Vardy at Stormont, thank you. Well, the current Brexit deal, as we've heard, has plenty of critics in Northern Ireland who say checks on goods between them and the UK has made trade harder. Others, though, appreciate that being in the EU single market for goods has kept trade easier with the Republic of Ireland. Our global trade correspondent Darshini David is here to explain the current situation and how the new deal may affect it. Darshini.
Fiona, thank you. Yes, the rules surrounding trade on the island of Ireland may not feel relevant to everyone in the UK, but this new deal may shape our future relationship with Europe and all our futures. Fundamentally, it'll streamline this process, sending goods across the Irish Sea. Good news in particular for those selling fresh food, sausages, eggs, milk from Great Britain. The current restrictions, the checks at Irish ports and paperwork, dozens of forms, sometimes at a cost and time too onerous for some producers. In fact, 2/3 of shoppers in Northern Ireland, according to one study, noticed smaller ranges in shops and higher prices when those changes came in. The new deal, when the arrangements are in place, should spell minimal formalities for the majority of British goods, those going via the Green Lane, destined to stay in Northern Ireland. That should mean a smoother passage for the rest, going via the Red Lane, where the sharing of trade data with the EU will also help. Now, those goods destined for the EU will have to follow still the bloc's existing rules and standards. But staying in that single market has made it easier for some businesses in the province to trade with the rest of Europe. The Northern Ireland economy may have suffered a smaller hit, claiming one study, equal to about 0.7% of its income, than the UK as a whole. The new arrangements may help even further. Moreover, that warmer tone between the EU and the UK could help agreement in areas where our post-Brexit arrangements are yet to be settled. Financial services, for example, the manufacture of electric vehicles, and also perhaps even iron out issues with our existing trade deals and relationships.
The relationship with President Macron is good. The relation with the Germans is better than it used to be. That means, firstly, that the European Union felt able to make the sorts of concessions it has in this deal on issues like state subsidies and VAT. It means, secondly, it's probably going to be easier to unlock other areas of cooperation, like cooperation in research. And finally, I think what it means is that it'll be easier for the UK and the EU to work together on key issues like Ukraine.
This framework could also remove uncertainty. One reason why economists reckon investment in the UK in equipment, factories, technology, that's that red line there. It actually stalled after the referendum. That makes us less efficient than we could be. That grey line there shows where investment could be if it grew at the same rate as before the referendum. The impact of that gap there could, a Bank of England study claims, equal over £1,000 per UK household. But first, the government needs political backing for this plan, the most bitterly contested part of the post-Brexit agreement. Fiona.
Darshini, thank you. Well, in a moment, we'll get the latest from our political editor, Chris Mason, who is in Windsor for us this evening. But first, let's join our Europe editor, Katya Adler, in Brussels. And Katya, there was no mistaking the warmth of the atmosphere between Rishi Sunak and Ursula von der Leyen, a real change of tone and an indication that if this agreement goes ahead, others may follow.
That is right, and I think relations have already changed, as you say. I mean, that chemistry between the two, the smiles, the warmth, what a stark contrast to those bad-tempered Brexit negotiations of old. We had both leaders today talking about a new chapter in EU-UK relations, and of course, Brussels knows how it works in the UK. It knows that before this new deal can actually be put into practice, Rishi Sunak has the hard task of selling it back home. But working so closely in cooperation to try to amend this deal, it's gone a long way to rebuilding broken trust. The EU likes Rishi Sunak. They know he's a Brexiteer, but they see him as an outward-looking pragmatist. So, if this deal is implemented, what could be looking to warm those relations and bring them even closer? Well, firstly, the idea of a trade war between the two sides, that would be off the table. And we saw those two leaders in their press conference today hurrying to say what other goodies might follow. So new deals on financial services, as we heard there from Darshini, perhaps on immigration as well, on scientific research. And the EU wants to work more closely with the UK on defence and security. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the conundrum of how to handle China, it's all been a reminder of the priorities the two sides share.
So, Chris, Windsor, all sounding rather positive from the EU, but the key thing now is this, as we now learn to call it, Windsor framework. Will it be enough to satisfy Conservative MPs, Democratic Unionists who vehemently opposed the current deal?
That is absolutely tonight the central political question. You may have noticed in my report a few minutes ago, no end of voices falling over themselves to say how pleased they were with this deal. But the real power tonight lies in the hands and the minds of those who are keeping their counsel, who are looking through the detail and will scrutinise it for some time and then reach a verdict. There are those on the Conservative backbenches who've long been sceptical, who will be doing that, and also Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party. Yes, there are political prizes for the Prime Minister in getting this far, that warmer relationship that Katja was talking about with the European Union, improvements as he sees it in the relationship that Northern Ireland can have with the rest of the UK. But the real prize is securing devolved government again in Northern Ireland. That means persuading the Democratic Unionist Party. Now, their leader tonight says they will go away and look at it. One of their MPs, though, Ian Paisley Jr., telling the BBC that he doesn't think it cuts the mustard. It proves that despite the smiles today, jeopardy still hangs in the air with this.
Well, we'll see how it unfolds in the next days, possibly weeks. Chris in Windsor, Katja in Brussels, thank you both very much. And the details of this new deal and response to it are still emerging. You can follow the latest on BBC News Online. That's bbc.co.uk/news. And you can, of course, use the BBC News app. The time is 17 minutes past 6. Our top story this evening. The Prime Minister hails his new trade deal for Northern Ireland with the EU, the so-called Windsor Framework, as an historic breakthrough. And are we set for another night of spectacular skies after yesterday's Northern Lights display?
And on BBC London, the young people being trained up to fill the capital's skill shortages. And the Londoners who are making a difference where you live. Find out how you can celebrate your local heroes.
The amount energy companies can charge households has been cut, but bills are still likely to rise because at the same time, government help with bills is being reduced. So from April, the energy regulator Ofgem is lowering the cap on energy bills for a typical household to £3,280 a year in England, Wales and Scotland. That's a cut of around £1,000. But it won't actually mean lower bills because the government is reducing its financial support, both to the energy companies and directly to us, the customers. So in fact, the typical annual household bill will go up by nearly £1,000 to £3,000 from April. Still with us? As our cost of living correspondent Coletta Smith explains.
We don't need the heating running around with him.
Little Rupert is keeping his mum and dad on the go, but keeping their prepayment energy meter topped up hasn't been easy.
The gas is just excruciating, isn't it? As soon as we put the heating on, we're on that £10 a day, which just isn't feasible at all. Cannot afford that.
Despite both working full-time, Vanessa and Derek still went into emergency credit on their meter recently.
Still took us into our overdraft. but needs must when you've got kids in the house.
Everyone's trying to do the juggle. Henry and William are getting pretty good at this game, balancing the lights, the heating and the power plugs to keep everyone happy and the bills down.
Let's turn everything down.
But at home, it's not a game for their mum.
Hot water bottles, electric blankets, more blankets, and I hate to say it, but we are relying on the wood burner to be able to keep on top of the bills that keep going up and up.
Over recent months, the global prices of gas and electricity have actually gone down, which is why from April the regulator is lowering the price cap. But we won't end up paying less, because at the moment we're not paying the whole bill. We've been paying a lower level set by the government, and they've been paying the difference. But now they want to pay less, and for customers to cover more of each bill. So from April, they're increasing the rate we'll be charged.
So now a typical household's bill will go up from around £2,500 a year to £3,000 a year. That's an increase of £500.
This April's rise comes at exactly the same time that the extra payments of £66 a month to each household directly from the government also stop. So the Chancellor's under increasing pressure from opposition parties and charities not to raise the rate we all have to pay.
Where are people going to get that money from? They're already stretched as it is. So I just don't understand how they're going to be able to pay it.
For Vanessa, it's frustrating.
No, we're not saving at all. We're not as bad off as other people, but we're still struggling.
Unless the Chancellor can deliver a surprise at the budget in a couple of weeks' time, we'll all be facing yet another energy bill increase for the year ahead. Coletta Smith, BBC News in Wallasey.
Tributes are being paid to Betty Boothroyd, the first female Speaker of the House of Commons, who's died at the age of 93. The current Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, described her as inspirational. James Landale looks back on her colourful life, which began as a dancer in London's West End before she smashed 700 years of tradition at Westminster.
Order! House must come to order!
At times, she was a referee.
Order!
At others, more of a nanny.
I think it is time that members of this House grew up.
But there was always a smile close by.
As Eric Morecambe would say, there's no answer to that.
Betty Boothroyd was a formidable ringmaster, full of authority and wit, but with a steel that was forged in Dewsbury in Yorkshire and in London's West End, where she was for some years a professional dancer, one of the famous Tiller Girls.
Vote Labour, vote Boothroyd!
But it was in politics that she found her real stage, showing again that determination behind the charm.
You're going to be voting for me tomorrow?
I hope so.
You hope so. So do I too, yes. With a cheery smile like that, I'm sure you are.
She stood 5 times before winning a seat in a by-election in 1973.
It shows total disillusionment in Ted Heath and his Tories, and it's time they cleared out.
As a member of Labour's national executive in the 1980s, she took on the party's hard left, dismissing them as headbangers, extremists and militants. But her popularity across all parties led to her being elected and ceremonially dragged to the Speaker's chair. The first woman, the first without a wig.
I don't think I could work in a full-bottom wig. You know, if I turned my head one way, the wig would stay in place and that'd be seen in profile.
For 8 years in the 1990s, she brought order to the Commons amid Tory decline and Labour rise. Always, she hoped, firm but fair. And at all times, she brought a steady hand to proceedings. Until she retired to the House of Lords, finding her voice again, opposing Brexit and Boris Johnson with equal vigour.
But let's not beat about the Euro bush. The Prime Minister set the course we're on and shows no remorse for steering it off course. I think she captured me there, a working woman, and that's enough for me because that's what I am.
Thus, Betty Boothroyd, dancer, MP, speaker, one of a kind.
Time's up.
Betty Boothroyd, irreplaceable, who's died aged 93. The new IRA has claimed responsibility for shooting a senior police officer in Omagh. Police have released CCTV footage of the car they say was used by the gunman 48-year-old Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell remains critically ill in hospital. A BBC Panorama investigation has uncovered evidence that women are being misled and manipulated about abortion by some crisis pregnancy advice centres in the UK. The centres, which operate outside the NHS, say they offer support to women dealing with unplanned pregnancies. But the BBC found more than a third gave advice which could dissuade women from having abortions. Contrary to NHS advice, several said abortion could increase the risk of breast cancer, infertility and mental health problems. Divya Talwar reports.
Emma was 23 when she found out she was pregnant. It wasn't planned.
I was very much in shock and thought, what am I going to do?
She went to a crisis pregnancy advice centre in Belfast called Stanton Healthcare. It says it offers counselling and accurate medical information to women with unplanned pregnancies. Emma was 6 weeks pregnant and could have had medication to induce an abortion, but she says that's not what the advisor told her.
She said to have the abortion, it would have to be surgery. It would either be a vacuum or to dissect limb from limb. I believed her completely. I thought, what reason would this girl have to lie to me?
Emma says the advisor also said she could face serious mental health problems if she had an abortion.
It was almost like she was pushing it on me, like, if you do this, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be suicidal. Her motive was to stop me from ever having or thinking about having an abortion.
Stanton Healthcare is one of at least 57 crisis pregnancy advice centres operating outside the NHS in the UK. After contacting all those that advertise online, BBC Panorama discovered that 21 gave advice that could dissuade women from having abortions.
Look, there's Stanton right there on the right.
10 weeks into a planned pregnancy and working with our team, Claire visited Stanton Healthcare undercover, seeking advice including about abortion. An advisor described what the centre says are the psychological risks.
I would go through a syndrome not talked about much. It's called the post-abortive syndrome. There's an anxiety that erodes your mental health, and it's severe. Is it medically actually proven?
I show the footage to Dr. Jonathan Lord from abortion provider MSI Reproductive Choices and Joe Holmes from the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy.
Post-abortion syndrome? Is that a thing?
No, it is completely made up. There is no evidence for it whatsoever.
Stanton Healthcare in Belfast is part of an American anti-abortion organisation called Stanton International.
Stanton's policy continues to be to provide the best possible accurate information and support to women to make their choice.
The Charity Commission in Northern Ireland told us it's already looking into Stanton Healthcare. Divya Talwar, BBC News.
Crisis Pregnancy Centres Uncovered is on Panorama at 8:30 tonight on BBC One, and you can also watch it on iPlayer. A former Love Island star, Tommy Fury, has won the latest high-profile boxing contest between novice fighters. After 8 rounds in Saudi Arabia, he beat the YouTuber Jake Paul by a split decision. Is this latest bout between two novices, more famous for their social media profile than any experience in the ring, a sign of how much the sport is changing? Joe Wilson reports.
Two young men made famous by social media in Saudi Arabia, earning millions of dollars trying to hurt each other. Tommy Fury in the white shorts is a former resident of Love Island, half-brother to Tyson Fury. Jake Paul, who's American, made his name posting pranks on YouTube. Boxing career, not even 20 matches between them. Their social media following, millions. That's what counts.
I think fights like that bring a lot more fans to boxing, but I think it's very different to the guys that actually put the time in and the effort in. And when they fight, you know there's a proper boxing match, there's skill. So I think it's very different, and I think there's a space for both to coincide.
Absolutely useless. Well, the former world champion Carl Froch said the match made a mockery of boxing. There's been lots of this kind of chat. Terrible. Tommy! Well, the fight attracted more publicity to Saudi Arabia, accused by some of using sport to distract from human rights abuses. Tommy Fury won, they may have a rematch, earn even more. Meanwhile, at the elite boxing gym in Bolton, the craft and the discipline is coached and rehearsed. Young people on the traditional route in this sport.
You know, it's a bit of a kick in the teeth for them sometimes, you know, because there's a lot of good prospects out there. They never get the exposure as these guys get.
As a boxer myself, if I could be a YouTube star and make multi-millions from it, then I would.
Inspiration. Well, boxing exists in a wider world worried about sporting concussion and the influence of social media. But if two famous people fight each other, there is a market for it. Joe Wilson, BBC News.
Last night, people across Britain got to see this. The Northern Lights, here caught at Glenalmond in Perthshire. The spectacular light shows caused by atoms and molecules in our atmosphere collided with particles from the sun. Now, normally, Scotland and parts of northern England see the lights, but unusually parts of southern England, like Crested in Shropshire, saw the phenomenon. Look at that. There were sightings in Kent and Cornwall too. And this is how the Northern Lights looked over Stonehenge. Oh, just fabulous. And there's a chance they could be seen again tonight, so keep your eyes peeled. So let's have a look at the weather. Louise Lear is here. So Louise, are we going to see more Northern Lights?
You can always rely on a good weather story, can't you, to spoil it, unfortunately. This was the most stunning shot I've seen in the Highlands, quite dramatic. And the reason why we had such an amazing aurora borealis was the amount of clear skies that we had across the country. This was yesterday. Look, clear skies in Scotland and across much of northern and central and southern England and Wales. But if we take a look at the satellite picture for now, you can see how much more cloud there is. So I'm not as optimistic that we will see quite a significant aurora borealis through the early hours. Western Scotland certainly seeing the best chance, but it's just worth opening the curtains in the middle of the night to see if you can see it. And the cloud has broken up from time to time. The reason why we've got this quiet story, high pressure still with us, but that northeasterly wind is just continuing to drift in cloud off the North Sea, and it's a real nuisance, hence the reason we're chasing cloud amounts around. Nearest to the high pressure Western Scotland, that's why you've got the clear skies, but that breeze is continuing to produce a few isolated showers to the east of the Pennines. They'll continue through the night tonight. The cloud acting like a blanket though, preventing those temperatures from falling very far, but in the clear skies in Scotland, once again, a frost maybe in rural parts as low as -5. So sunny skies here, but we will have this stubborn cloud and it's going to come and go throughout the day. There will be some breaks, particularly across the southeast of England. Scattering of showers most widely to the east of the Pennines, but not exclusively. And temperatures will once again between 7 and 9 degrees. Now, by the end of the day, we'll see some showers into the southeast. That's a weather front. That is going to produce those showers moving away. And as we go through the end of the week, the high pressure not moving very far, very fast. So you guessed it. Once again, we are going to be chasing cloud amounts, but it's going to be largely fine and dry and temperatures where they should be for the beginning of March. Fiona.
Louise, thanks very much. And that is the BBC News at 6 on Monday, the 27th of February. You can keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC website. From the 6 team, it's goodbye, and the news continues here on BBC One. Now, of course, it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Bye-bye.